Let me start this video with this particular passage from the book, The Birth of Breaking. Now, I know I talked about this book in my previous video, but I want to try to connect some dots. For example, why is it that we associate breaking with Latinos? So this particular passage seeks to examine that question. So here we go. At the same time, pioneering practitioners tend to espouse an ethos of multicultural unity when discussing breaking in hip-hop culture. Kool Herc is especially known for stating that Martin Luther King's dream came true in the form of hip-hop, with little white boys and little black girls walking together, dancing together, rapping together, making clothes together, doing business together. Such statements are reminiscent of the beloved community ideology of the civil rights movement of Herc's youth, as well as the message from prominent funk and soul artists from the late 1960s and early 1970s. Another quote that Herc regularly cites when espousing what he calls the we thing of hip-hop is funk singer Baby Huey's declaration that there are three kinds of people in the world. There are black people, white people, and then there are my people. In this regard, it should be remembered that leading funk artists regularly profess multicultural aspirations, as when Sly Stone sang about different strokes for different folks, and we all have to live together, from his hit song Everyday People, and when James Brown sang about long-haired hippies and Afro-blacks can get together across the railroad tracks, and they party to his Get on the Good Foot single. And of course, the following passage from the famous B-Boy anthem, It Just Begun by Jimmy Castor's Bunch, also speaks to such transcendent sentiments such as, peace will come, this world will rest once we have togetherness. Given the prevalence of such messaging in the funk movement that hip-hop came from, it should come to no surprise that pioneers continue to champion such principles. Pairing his experience in writing in hip-hop with the segregation he saw growing up in the Bronx, Phase 2 also celebrate the fact that this art brings all of the cultures together as one. I just find it funny that most of the time it's Black Americans that have this open door policy. And as you will see in this video, that's always not the case with other groups.
Mr. Joe Bataan has been making pioneering sounds since 1966. He began with a doo-wop soul sound, moved into boogaloo, was a pioneer of salsa at Fania Records, was one of the first people signed to Fania Records, moved on and pioneered the South Soul, Latin Soul business, and the South Soul record label, which we all know about. Many of us have the records in our crates to this day. And then he made one of the first rap records. In fact, before Rapper's Delight, he had a record called Rappo Clappo. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, but please join me in welcoming the legendary Mr. Joe Bataan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you have said something really, really interesting in interviews, which is that boogaloo, you think, as a style, which had its heyday pretty much from about 66 to 68, 69 or so, was actually run off the air, was actually suppressed. And that's a really interesting thought. I mean, a lot of people feel like, oh, well, the kids were dancing to it for a little while, but there was a new dance that came along, they did something else, blah, 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 blah. But you're actually saying that a lot of the Mambo folks, the Mambo Kings, the sort of folks that were, the purists, the folks that were really into the Wawanko or the Descargas or that or whatever, they actually suppressed the music. Yeah?
They chased us off the air. The story has come out. It took maybe 40 years to find out what actually happened. If they ever do a movie about it, the truth will come out. Actually, the boogaloo saved Latin music.
So Joe Bataan alluded to something that sounded very sinister, but he avoided espousing on it in this particular interview, but I found something that may speak to what happened to Joe Bataan, and I found it in this book. The name of the book is called Salsa Rising, New York Latin Music of the 60s Generation by Juan Flores. So I'm going to read a passage from pages 209 to 211. Even though Bataan's main complaint with the music industry was economic, he not getting his share of royalties and publicity, there were other important issues at stake that were not measurable in dollars and cents. In the same period, Bataan was being considered to be the Latin counterpart to Soul Train. Well-established producers Alan Lauber and David Yarnell were on board, and arrangements were out to the sponsors, and everything seemed to be set. But as Bataan recalls, Fania and Izzy Zanabria caught wind of this plan too, and quickly threw a wrench into it. Somehow they managed to contact the advertising agencies and stated that Joe Bataan wasn't from a Puerto Rico background and shouldn't represent the Latin soul show on TV. When they pressured the agencies to replace Bataan with Izzy Zanabria, Channel 11 decided to drop the project altogether. Despite Joe Bataan's strong roots and popularity in El Barrio and his extensive success creating Latin music, Fania was able to throw doubt on his being a real Latino, suggesting that because of his lack of authenticity, he was not qualified to represent Latinos in their music. Thus, in addition to short dissension over economic and compensation and business ethics between Bataan and Fania, the record company was successful in questioning his ethnic representation and belonging, challenging his ethnicity so as to marginalize the troublemaker as an outsider to the culture. Somehow they didn't seem to have the same problem with Larry Harlow, for example, who actually had far less cultural credibility and social experience than Bataan, but was squarely in Fania's inner circle and remained more loyal to his agenda, at least at that point. Let me just say for the record, Larry Harlow was Jewish, yet he was more accepted by the Latinos. This is Mr. Salsa. What is salsa? This is Izzy Zanabria. Fun fact, Rand Fleet says this is his uncle. So I guess anti-blackness run in the family. I want to highlight this brother right here. His name is Don Elias. He's an African-American conga player. He played with greats like Miles Davis, Chick Corea, and Dizzy Gillespie. Now, to be honest with you, I never heard of this brother until recently. But the reason why I'm highlighting him in this video is because he did an interview some years ago, which he talks about his career. But I really want to focus on a particular person he mentions in this interview, and his name is Bill Fitch. He's also an African-American percussionist. Now, what you're going to find is not only interesting, but it's quite alarming.
Anyway, so I had moved to Boston, and I was literally walking down Commonwealth Avenue, two-story of mine, Commonwealth Avenue, and a cat, oh no, it was Newbury Street because the dormitory was on Newbury. This cat comes running out, swear to God, two-story, stopped me in the middle of the street and asked me if he knew anybody that played conga drum. I'm thinking he's jive, you know what I mean? I said, where am I going to find, this, thing? So I said, man, well, yeah, I'll play a little bit. He said, well, come on upstairs, man, come on upstairs. And the mentor, or the guy who was in charge of the dormitory at that time, was Arif Martin, the guy from Atlanta. I remember his face too. So he took me upstairs and he had conga drums and we started to play. And I'm saying, who is this cat, man? Who is this cat, It was Bill Fitch. And we started having a very beautiful friendship together to the point where we moved in together. We roomed together. And I was studying biochemistry, so I had my lab set up over here, all my labs here set up over here, and he had his conga drums and everything. And I would, you know, I wouldn't study, you know, wind up playing with him all the time. And we started to play with each other. He wasn't so much into the real heavy Afro-Cuban. He was a great conga player for salsa music, but he wasn't into so much the bembes and stuff. He wasn't into that. But I was, you know, because I started to do that. So now all of a sudden, you know, Bill gets the call to play with Miriam Makeba. While he was in Boston, they needed a conga player to play with Miriam Makeba. And he decided to go to New York. He says, D, I'm going to New York, man, and it wasn't enough for him. There wasn't nothing for him to do up there, you know. Went to New York, the chick had already left. They come by my pad and also and said, I'm going to New York, but I had to stay because I was trying to finish school. They formed a band with Milford Graves. A lot of people didn't know Milford also was a timbale player. You know, Milford later became a real avant-garde drummer. And him and Milford and Chick with Pete Yellen, you know, saxophone player. Mm-hmm. They formed a Latin band. And the next progression was Bill got the call to play with Cal Jada. So with Bill, you know, let's just get off of Bill. And then he went to California to join Cal Jada's band. And Martin, something happened. I don't know if you know the take on him, man, but he went way down. And gradually, something happened. And he wrote me a letter. And in this letter, he said... During the time he wasn't involved in drugs? Not when we lived together. No way. Drink some, pot. But not me. It was never even mentioned.
But he was from New Haven, wasn't he?
New Haven, Connecticut. Right. So now he writes me this letter from California. He says, D, he says, I'm playing with Cal Jada, man, and the Latin cast, the Cuban cast are coming in telling Jada, why you got this black American cat here? What's up with that? So I wrote him back, man. I said, Bill, what are you worrying about this crap for with these cats? Man, you play better than practically all of them. Why are you worried about this thing? This is what I wrote him. I didn't hear from him for about a year and a half. He comes back, Martin, and he's almost a derelict, man. Threw up in my car. I had quit playing. Came back from New York, quit playing. I was living in Providence, and we were driving around.
You quit playing?
I quit playing twice.
What were you doing?
I'm a biochemist, man. I went to school to study medicine. I wound up getting my degree in biochemistry. And I had started to play while I was in Boston, and I quit the biochemistry, and I was on my way out to California to play with Johnny Martinez. Mm-hmm. I had a gig. I stopped back in New York to say goodbye to all the cats, and when I stopped in New York, I said there was no way I'm going out there. I gotta pay some dues. I moved my whole family to New York, which just didn't last. But anyway, I saw Bill, man. He was like a derelict, man. He had just done an about face with his life. Drinking, smelled bad, looked like he was into some manic depressive stuff, you know, was always down like that. And I could never find out what happened, Martin.
You mean to this day?
To this very day, I could never find out what happened to him to make him change up like that.
I don't know. I had heard he seemed to have a difficult time, but it was only like talking to Giovanni when he talked about that. They played beat for beat the inside solo.
And what impressed me about him, because he was going to Berkeley at the time I met him, he was one of the first conga players I met that wrote and read music. I thought that was, man, I had so much respect and admiration for that, man. He wrote and read and everything, you know, and that's it. Man, this guy is something else, you know. Took things very, very seriously.
So you think it's possible that the pressure from the Latin scene just beat him down? I'm
thinking that's the only thing that could be, because I didn't know what else happened. I didn't know if he was taking some acid and freaked out, or met a girl or something that freaked him out. I didn't know nothing about that. But that was the only thing that he wrote me about in the letter, was that these Latin cats were putting pressure on Jada to get like a Latin guy to play.
Who replaced him?
Louis Miranda, maybe?
Now, could it be that the people who claim that we are all of the same African diaspora really don't mean it? I have never heard of a black American excluding anyone from participating in our culture. But hey, it's no secret that the Latino community has a serious issue with racism and colorism. That's real talk. Now let me tie up some loose ends as it relates to this propaganda video. I should have covered this before, but better late than never, okay? Now, we all know that Dr. Colon has said that the influence of Latin percussion started with China Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie and with the making of Manteiga. And then he says it went to the Palladium, and that's when this influence happened. But clearly, not all Latinos are on board with this particular narrative. One particular person I want to bring to your attention is Joe Bataan. The other is Tito Puente Jr., who describes the influences at different points much later. So for me, this proves that if Latin percussions are foundational to Black American music, you should be able to pinpoint a period where everyone agrees to that. You just can't have one person believe in one thing, another person believe in another. And when we talk about this whole thing about Latin percussion and influence, this is what you have. Now, I totally reject a Latin percussion influence. It's just percussions. They act as if Black people had no syncopation until Latinos came along. So I want you to listen to what Joe Bataan says and what Tito Puente says.
But no one had really gotten the idea of how to use the Latin influence with our idea at that time until South Soul came. And Sylvia wants me to go play on this record with this new group, hip-hop group. My father didn't know you guys, and you, in return, didn't know him. So it was a clash, almost not a clash, but a meeting of two genres at that moment, mambo music and hip-hop music. And it was the first time in history that ever happened. So Tito Puente was one of the first pioneers of playing on a hip-hop record ever. I think it was probably before Curtis Blow had Jimmy Delgado play on the breaks. He played the song on the breaks. There was a T-Vale solo there. You guys were first.
Period. I want to be as assertive as possible in driving home the point that the conga drum is not a Latin instrument. The conga drum was created by Africans living in Cuba. The construction of the drum has historically mirrored the craftsmanship of drum making in Africa for centuries. The only difference would be the materials used to construct it. By consistently seeing Latinos playing these drums, we can easily forget that at one time in Cuba and in Puerto Rico, these drums were seen as primitive and were banned by the Spanish during certain periods of their history. Because of the successful whitewashing of African culture in the Caribbean and in Latin America, we sometimes forget that these are African drums and African rhythms. This is Kofo, the Wonder Man, to the left. He's from Nigeria. He's a world-renowned percussionist. He is the master of the talking drum. He can play scales and chords on his drum. He plays everything from traditional Nigerian music to the fusion of funk, rock, and jazz. The person who's playing alongside of him on the congas is African as well. Now check this out. Can you imagine a Latino person walking up to Kofo and saying, those congas that your percussion is playing, that happens to be a Latin instrument. And by the way, he's also playing Latin rhythms. How well do you think that would go? As a matter of fact, I really don't believe a Latino would ever have the nerve to approach an African percussionist and say that. So without question, the drum and the rhythms are not Latin. They're African. Let me end this video with this caveat. And I want to thank my brother Malik Bey for tipping me with this information. Now, check this out. You heard over time that Colon has said that the DJs and the B-boys are the foundation to hip-hop. Now, we know that he also believes that Herc is the father of hip-hop. We also know that Herc believed brothers like Sasa, Trixie, the Twins, and Dancing Doug were B-boys. He called them B-boys. Colon is under the opinion that they are not B-boys, and therefore they should not hold that title, irrespective of the fact that the term was coined long before Herc and long before the Puerto Ricans even got involved into breaking. But nevertheless, that is Cologne's opinion. He wants to attribute breaking or b-boy culture to Latinos, to the track twos of the world, to the batches of the world. That's what he wants to give credit to b-boying. Now the question becomes, now listen to this carefully, if the merry-go-round was created in 1975 as Cologne alleges, and they were designed specifically for b-boys, then who were the b-boys he was playing these extended breaks for? According to the historical record, it's Sasa, Trixie, Dancing Doug, the Twins. It was not Batch. It was not Track 2. It was not Spider. It was not the CC Crew. It was not the Rockwell Association. It was these brothers. So the issue for Cologne is simple. If he does not want to give credit or give b-boy status to these brothers, then Hurt cannot be the father of hip-hop, because the so-called merry-go-round or the extended breaks that he considered the essence of hip-hop was not created for Latinos. It was not created for the b-boys that he wants to cite. It was created for the b-boys pictured in this particular photograph here. So that would mean that Hurt is not the father of hip-hop, according to Cologne's own definition of who b-boys were. So let that sink in for a moment. Subscribe, thumb up the video, share, peace.